All right, hello. We are here for another tier list. This is D1 basketball teams. We're not doing logos. It says logos on the tier list maker, but it's just a good tier list um, with all the teams. I think it's got all the teams, so I haven't paid too much attention of what teams have been added to Division One in the last couple years. But if this is updated through last year, that's pretty good. There's probably a couple that are missing that were added this year, but I wouldn't even know who they are. So not a huge deal. I don't think to leave them out. Um, all right, so I'll give a little bit of my background in basketball, but first the tiers that I'm going to use. The way that I'm going to do this is like who would I root for? I'll put them in tiers and then I'll rank them at the end. So favorites to root for would be my favorite teams. The usually root for would be like, yeah, I'm for the most part going to hope that team does well unless they're maybe playing my favorites. More likely to root for would be a team I know, but don't necessarily root for all the time. It's like, yeah, I guess, I hope they do better than worse. I have a couple tiers in the middle here. I had it as one that was just indifferent, but I think I'm going to have a decent amount. There's like 360 teams or something in college basketball. These would be the teams that I don't know that well. I do know all the teams like that they exist. I don't know everything about them certainly. So these would be more where I'm going to base it off of like their logo or where they're from or mascot, things like that. So anyway, I split it into two. One would be like, hey, based off that stuff, I'd probably root for them. So if you just imagine like, oh, they're two 16 seeds playing in the tournament, I'll probably root for that one over that one because of those factors that I just mentioned. And then vice versa on those that I'm indifferent but would like less. Then on the flip side of what I said above, you got more likely to root against. Uh, don't hate them, but kind of don't hope they do great most of the time unless they're playing lower tier teams. And then usually root against is like, yeah, I'm not a big fan. And then last favorites to root against. I know it says favorites, but it's like I don't like them and I root against them. So a little bit of background. I've watched college basketball my whole life, so most of my memories probably really start about the early 90s of basketball. I think college basketball, that's when I first, I think, started going to college basketball games. I've been to several different venues with several different teams. Um, Grew up in Indiana, so in Indiana, I was around basketball a lot. Even as a very young kid, my parents used to take me to games when I was like I couldn't even. I was like 6 months old. I couldn't do anything. And so we would actually travel. Basketball in Indiana is different. Like high school basketball is different. I live in Kentucky now. I've lived here a long time. It is not nearly the same as what Indiana used to be. Now, maybe Kentucky was that way too back then, but Indiana was awesome in terms of the high school basketball product, in terms of having fans, wanting to go to games, wanting to travel to games. Uh, and then it kind of died off a little bit when I got to about the middle of high school. It was still great, but it wasn't the same. And the reason it wasn't the same, a little bit of an aside, is because they got rid of class basketball. Or I'm sorry, they added class basketball, got rid of classless basketball. And so it went from everybody played everybody to try to win the one state championship, which is like the movie Hoosiers, based off of a true story, to hey, we're going to have five different divisions based on your school size and you can win your division, right? So you're one of five state champions or something like that. I think they missed the boat on that. I think they misunderstood the value of that, like winning a state title just in your division versus winning what was like your sectional, which is just your five local teams or six local teams or whatever, and then regional and semi-state. It became a huge deal when you didn't have classes to beat it. And even the town I was coming from is a small town. Like it was 10 to 12,000 people, yet we were the biggest school in our sectional. And so when the other small towns happened to beat us in the sectional, and they had some good teams for small schools for sure, like it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal. And so college basketball or high school basketball was very engaging. It made you passionate about the sport, made me passionate about the sport. I love to go to the games, I love to play. And then by the time I got a little bit older, and we didn't have a school like immediately around, but close enough. And then once my brother went to college, I started going to games there and some other things. So started to get even more into college basketball. used to do the brackets for tournament, right? It's not as easy as going to ESPN today. It was wait and hope the bracket's in the newspaper. It's probably a blank one, and you got to fill it out and watch it on TV, because if it's not recorded, you're going to kind of miss what it was and have to wait for the newspaper the next day where it's filled out. And so we would do that as a family. We'd all like get a bracket and write it out, and then you know fill it out and put it on the fridge, and keep track of it. So with that, you get a lot of experience in who some of these teams are. You know, March Madness, it's fun. You get to see the teams in the conference tournament. And so a lot of these teams I do know to some capacity, at least of their existence. I just may not know a lot about their program or remember games or key games that they've played. So with that, we'll get started. I think these are all in alphabetical order, but it could get a little tricky if I don't recognize a logo and like they move them around. Like it could be, oh, you're Florida International and it's FIU, or they put University of something in front and it's down in the U's or whatever. I don't know. So I'll just have to try to recognize it. I've got a list of the D1 schools on a screen in front of me, aside from this tier list, so that I can reference if I need to see a mascot, a logo. Well, I got the logo, but the where they're from, those kind of things. So without further ado, we will get into this. So I think Air Force, I was playing around with moving it. That's why it's first. It's not actually first in alphabetical order, but I was just testing to making sure it dragged okay. So I'll go ahead and do Air Force. Air Force is a school I think of more around football, and I should say too, like I'm going to try not to let football influence my basketball decision here. And I was considering doing just a blended one and saying D1 schools, and if you have a basketball team and football, great. If not, whatever. But I think it's a little different. I've got some teams, I went through some in my head. I'm like, yeah, I kind of don't mind them in basketball and don't like them in football, or vice versa. So I thought it'd be better if I just split them up and do it different if I want to do the football one as well. So Air Force, anyway, is a team I think more about football. Their basketball team I don't think is very good right now, but they are the Falcons. They've got a kind of cool mascot. It's not really a team I pay much attention to or care about that much, but I think I'd have them probably in my like indifferent, but would like more. Like if they were, they're not going to be like a low seed, but if they were a 13 seed, a 12 seed, in the tournament, I don't think I'd like root against them or anything. So pretty decent program. All right, Abilene Christian. This is in Texas, Abilene, Texas. They are the Wildcats. Don't know anything about Abilene Christian. Don't remember them being in the tournament, but maybe once. I think I'm just indifferent about them, and I'm not a huge fan of their logo or their mascot. Wildcats a little generic, but that was my high school. We're the Wildcats, but we had cooler colors. We were black and gold. So yeah, I'll have that as indifferent, but I'd probably root against them. And if I'm kind of thinking of it like, oh, if they're a 16 seed and they're playing another 16 seed, there's likely another 16 seed that I'd root for over them. All right, Akron. The Zips, one of the best nicknames in sports, in college sports, for sure. Akron is in the MAC. They are in Akron, Ohio. I like Akron. I like MAC schools, a good amount of MAC schools. Like I'll root for them in the tournament. They'll usually get like a 12 or a 13 seed, the best team. And I know there's rivalries and stuff within the MAC where I'm sure their fan bases hate the other team or whatever, don't want to do well. That's everywhere. But I'll usually root for the MAC. So that Akron's a team I'd more likely root for. I'd be more likely to root for. All right, Alabama. Tuscaloosa, Alabama is a difficult one to like differentiate my football bias from basketball. They're a program that I don't really like think too much about the players in. I remember Avery Johnson was coaching there for a while. They have Nate Oates now. They're obviously top 3-4 team in the country. We'll see if it translates to the tournament being successful for once. It feels like they've kind of fell short for the most part. I could be wrong. I've watched. I mean, I haven't watched a whole lot of basketball the last, I want to say, a couple of years. I mean, once COVID hit, I was like, okay, and then NIL hit, and I was like, I really don't want to watch too much. So I haven't seen Alabama a whole lot this year, other than like clips of highlights and things. But they're pretty decent. That said, they're not my favorite team. I'd probably be more likely to root against, unless it was again one of the teams below. So yeah, Bama, Alabama A&M. Alabama A&M is Huntsville, I think. Yeah, Huntsville. They're the Bulldogs. Don't know much about Alabama A&M at all. Again, a generic logo, generic mascot. I'd probably be like, I wouldn't really root for them. All right. Okay, this is an example. I thought this would be like UAB. I think this is Alabama Birmingham. Uh, so that's the Blazers. That's just the logo looks very familiar. I think I've seen it on their football helmets and things. So UAB. UAB was back in Conference USA. I think back when I liked that conference. It's changed a lot over the years. It's still fine, but watched it more growing up. UAB had a couple like big wins in the tournament where they've upset some teams. Kentucky was one of them. They had a couple of twins, I remember, that were really good in that game, in that tournament. And those are the types of teams that are fun, that are exciting, like in the tournament. Everybody knows it, but they go on a run, don't just win a game, they win a couple games, they get a lot of momentum. And you see these guys like take advantage of the opportunity and really become something for that time that they're in the tournament. So UAB is a team that I would probably be more likely to root for. It's not a team that I'm like, oh, I hope UAB does really well this year, but UAB's a team that I'd root for more than some of the others. Okay, let's see. Is this Alabama State? Alabama State, I guess an ASU name. Hornets. They're in the SWAC. So is Alabama and A&M. They're both in the SWAC. I don't know the SWAC. SWAC is usually like 100% a 16 seed. I feel like they're usually the worst in terms of conference power rating or whatever. They're in Montgomery, Alabama, and Alabama State. I like the Hornets, and I'll say I'll have them indifferent, but would like more unless I see some others and it starts getting too top heavy. But yeah, I like the Hornets. Okay, University of Albany, so in New York, Albany, the Great Danes. They're in the East, American East. I like Great Danes. I don't like their logo that much, and I don't really like their colors all that much. So I would say I'd probably have them in the indifferent, but would like less. I don't really know much about the conference or remember too much about the conference, but some of those Northeast schools I'm not a huge fan of. So gut feel is I don't like them that much. Alcorn State is in the SWAC as well. I do know they're in Mississippi. Looks like the city is called Lorman. They are the Braves, Alcorn Braves. Generic, don't like the name. Kind of indifferent about another SWAC team here. All right, American University in Washington, D.C., the Eagles. So this is probably the smallest university, I'd say, in Washington. There's a few others. Well, maybe Howard, but you have Georgetown, George Mason, George Washington, then American and Howard, I think. American, okay, the Eagles, it's fine. Like, I get it. It's patriotic, whatever. It's fine. Probably root for them more than some other teams, but not sure. We'll see. Appalachian State, Boone, North Carolina. Know that one because the football team is a little bit more popular to me. I don't know a whole lot about their basketball team. I have seen them play a little bit. They're usually pretty scrappy. They're in the Sun Belt. Appalachian State is probably a team I'd root for, like in the tournament. All right, now we're getting into a big dog again. Arizona. Arizona Wildcats. Arizona is in now the Big 12. They were in the Pac 10 forever, Pac 12 forever. Tucson, Arizona. I remember a lot of Arizona. I remember uh, the Mike Bibby team where it was who else was on that team? Um, Simon was his last name because it was the whole Simon Says Championship when Kentucky they beat Kentucky. Miles Simon. And man, there was a third player who was really good. I don't know if Jason Terry was on that team, but I believe Jason Terry was there. So they had Lute Olson as a coach forever. You remember, Lute Olson. He was good for a very long time. So it was good. It's sometimes looking back, it's good. For some of those coaches to like win one that had been around a while. That were good coaches. Uh, but yeah, they were pretty good. That said, I usually root against them a little bit. More recently, I don't. I know they've had a lot of good players. I like DeAndre Ayton. I think was there recently, and I'm sure I'm missing some. But it seems like they've got maybe Chase Budinger was there. I remember some of those teams. But yeah, Arizona's just not one of my favorite teams. I've kind of always rooted against them a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. All right, Arizona State. Um, I know them as well. I think is Bobby Hurley still coaching there, maybe. But Arizona State, James Harden. I don't remember James Harden at all from college. I think it was before he had his beard. But he was a high draft pick, so I just may not have seen a whole lot of him. Sometimes those West Coast teams, it's tough to catch them on TV if you're watching it, and you might get the late, 10:30 game. But even then, what Arizona State's usually not the premier in that what was that league. You get more the UCLA's, the Arizona, who we just talked about. So Arizona State. It's a little trick. I mean, I guess I'm not a huge fan. Like I'm sitting here trying to convince myself, oh, I'd root for them, but I just don't have that in me to really want to root for them. Arkansas. So Arkansas is a fun one. They have John Calipari now, and not sure that they're going to make the tournament this year. Struggled a lot in the SEC. But their heyday growing up was Nolan Richardson, and I remember those Nolan Richardson teams, the 40 Minutes of Hell. They were fun to watch. Corliss Williamson is the guy I remember a lot. I think they had, oh man, what was the guy's first name? I think his Day was the last name. Um, but yeah, I remember that team a lot and believe they beat Duke. Fun team to watch. Played their butts off. Like that was a team I remember playing really hard, and you just don't. I just don't see it as much anymore, like to that level of physicality. But yeah, they were fun, and I've kind of always liked Arkansas since then. That Eric Musselman recently kind of underachieved. I mean, achieved a decent amount in the regular season, and I think flamed out in the tournament usually. But I liked Arkansas. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Arkansas with John Calipari. I don't think he's going to be there very long. I think it's going to be like a year or two, and then they'll kind of come back. But that's a team I'd like more likely root for most of the time, because they sometimes especially get pushed aside, like in the SEC, because SEC people care far, 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 far more about football than basketball, and Arkansas tends to have had more success in basketball, I think, than football. Okay, first tough one here. I don't really know who this is, so I have to look it up. It is Arkansas Pine Bluff. I know the name, I know the school, but I did not know their mascot was the Golden Lions. They are in the SWAC as well. Man, we got a lot of SWAC schools to start. I guess that's what happens when you have Alabama and Arkansas schools. Um, okay, so Pine Bluff is in Arkansas. I don't even know where Pine Bluff the town is, but the Golden Lions, pretty cool logo. I'll give them a little bit of credit and throw them up on the indifferent, but would like more than some of the others. And then we have, is this the Red Wolves of Arkansas State? I think they're in football. Yeah. So Arkansas State is in Jonesboro, Arkansas. The Red Wolves, I'm not a huge fan of their logo, and it's like one of those things. If they were playing the Golden Lions, I'd probably root for the Golden Lions of Pine Bluff. Army. So Army is not very known for basketball, other than I think Bob Knight was there long, long, long time ago. Mike Krzyzewski played for him there, and that was important lineage, obviously down the road. But I don't know much about them in basketball other than that. That said, like I like Army. I mean, I root for them a little bit in basketball or football. I mean, so basketball, I don't see why I wouldn't really root for them. And the Black Knights is kind of a cool name. So I'll have them like with Air Force kind of deal, and I'll reorder these later. But just kind of indifferent about them. I don't know anything about their program to just say I watch them or care about them. Auburn. Auburn Tigers. Again, a little like Alabama, where I've got to separate the football from the basketball. Charles Barkley played there. It was before I watched college, so I don't really have any memories of that. They've been good lately. They're good this year with Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl has gone through. I knew Bruce Pearl before Bruce Pearl was popular because he coached at University of Southern Indiana, which at the time was a Division II school. That was when I was growing up. They were very good in Division II. They've now moved up to Division One. But yeah, he that was kind of his stepping stone. He's always got a bit of a reputation about him, which you've seen with some of the allegations and things he's had throughout the years. But he is a darn good coach. And I would say, I would be more likely to root for Auburn in basketball, probably, than and it's some of it's like, oh, I'd rather than beat Alabama or something like that. So I'll see and make sure once I get going that I don't move them down here. I feel it in my gut, but I think they're there. Austin P, the Governors. Now you might think, who in the hell knows Austin P? I actually know Austin P, and the reason I know Austin P was because of my dad. My dad, one of his favorite players, and this is who he always emulated when we played out back in the backyard, was Fly Williams. Guy's name was Fly, and Fly played for Austin P. And you can imagine the jokes that would come when you have P and Fly Williams in there. So it's like go P, let fly loose, so go P or something like that. So they had some pretty nifty nicknames for it, but Fly was he was a chucker, what we call a chucker, where he just put up buckets. Now I think he had a lot of personal problems and stuff ultimately, so he didn't make it in the pros very long. But I knew Austin P, and so I would say Austin P, is a team I'd more likely root for because of the history and just family stuff. So Ball State, the Cardinals. Ball State is actually coached by Michael Lewis, who I know or have met or knew growing up. My brother was friends with him, and I was good friends with his younger brother. Went to high school with them. And so like them just for that reason. But Ball State historically, they're in Muncie, they're in the MAC. And I should have said Austin Peay's in the A-Sun, so it's a little bit of a different league. But Ball State is one of those like Indiana schools that I was mostly indifferent about. I don't know a whole lot of their history. They are, a MAC school, like I said, but I don't know that I would root for them over. So I'm kind of a little indifferent about Ball State. I'd probably root for them now because Michael Lewis is there, but I haven't really watched them this year to know how they're doing. Okay, Baylor Bears. Baylor was always an interesting school because I don't remember them too much until they got that coach that supposedly I don't think he murdered somebody, but hid a murder from one that one of his players did, whatever that was. And then they got Scott Drew and turned the program around. I mean, I think they won a title and they've had, a lot of success, and it's in Waco. Baylor Bears, Big 12 now, or still, but they are a team that I'd probably more likely root for. It's kind of easy to say, oh, I shouldn't because they won a title and Scott Drew on. But I liked Baylor historically. I don't mind them, and I would root for them over some of these other teams that we get farther down where I'm I don't like them. All right, Bellarmine, congrats on making it to D1. It's been there a couple of years. They killed their tournament the first year and couldn't go to the NCAA because they have some stupid rule for some reason that you can't like go until like 5 years in, or something like 3 years. But really dumb rule. Don't get it. Something about money or whatever, I'm sure. But the Bellarmine Knights, that's where I went to grad school. They were always a really good Division II program, and I've played against a lot of Bellarmine players, like in just league games. They're so fundamentally sound. They're the best shooters, that you see. A lot of those D2 players, because they're not the most athletic, are just like knockdown shooters and really fundamentally sound. And Bellarmine is like that. So Bellarmine's a team that I will say I usually root for. I didn't really know them or pay attention to them before, like when they were in D2. I do have a gym shirt that I wear that is their 2012 championship, something like that. Is when I was around grad school, so around that time. But yeah, so Bellarmine's a good school. They have Scotty Davenport, who's pretty popular around Louisville in general, and so they're a fun team to watch. Belmont Bruins are in Nashville. I know that. They're in the MVC, Missouri Valley. The Belmont Bruins, and I know they've only been in, I think, Missouri Valley for a few years now. But yeah, Belmont, I always liked. They would make it to the tournament. They'd be a good team to watch. I cannot remember their coach's name, but especially more recently, like anytime Belmont's in there, their Nashville team, not too far from here, that I'd root for them. So I'll put them up in the more likely to root for. Bethune-Cookman. It's in Florida. I know that. Daytona. I've driven past it. So yeah, they are the Wildcats. They are in the SWAC. Don't know anything about them. Not a big fan of their logo. Very generic name. That's going to hold for a bit. That methodology. So indifferent, but I wouldn't like them as much as the others. All right, Binghamton. Binghamton is in Binghamton, New York. They're in the American East. They're the Bearcats. I like their logo. I don't know a whole lot about them, but it's pretty sweet. I'm a big fan of the Bearcat logo, so I will put them up there. Boise State. Boise State is famous for football, but I like Boise State. I like their team for the most part. I don't really actively root for them or whatever, but if they're in the tournament and they're, a 10 seed or something, I don't root against them unless it's a team that I like significantly more. So Boise State has always had, I think, a pretty good team. Now, the one problem I had with Boise State is they did beat a team I was rooting for in Louisville many, many years ago, I think, in the tournament. I seem to remember that, where they had a couple guys who were just like really good guards that knocked them out. But that happens. You get matched up and play a good team. I think I probably rooted for them to win after they beat Louisville. So that's how it goes. Boston College, the Eagles. It's in the ACC. They're in Boston. Actually, they're in Chestnut Hill. It's all Boston to me. Boston College Eagles. I'm trying to think if there were any players that stood out to me historically there. It just has always felt like a not great basketball school. And usually with those ACC schools or, I can think of something. I can't think of any of them from there. Maybe I will, but I root against them. Mostly I might root for them if they have a player that's pretty fun to watch, but I don't think I'm really for them. Okay, Boston University. It's in Boston, actually in Boston. It's Patriot League. Army was in the Patriot League. They're the Terriers, so a very vicious dog, as you can tell. Famous mostly because this is where Rick Pitino started. And so Boston, I don't know much about since there. I'm definitely indifferent, but with the Pitino connection, who's always a good coach, and they were scrappy and made the tournament, I think. It's worth giving them a little bit of credit for. All right, Bowling Green University. Falcons in Bowling Green, Ohio, in the MAC. Talked about some of the MAC schools. Bowling Green, for some reason, is a team that I don't root for as much as maybe some of the others, kind of like a Ball State. So I'm going to have them in there. But again, if they're like a 12 seed or so and they're playing a team I don't like, I'll probably, I'm like, oh, it's a MAC team. I hope they, make a Sweet 16 or something like that. So start them there. Bradley. Bradley is in the MVC. Bradley is a team that has been pretty good historically, I know, in the MVC. They were in the tournament several years that I remember growing up. They had one guy who's like a big dude. You don't really get that too much in those smaller conferences. That was like a really good player for a few years, and he went to the NBF. I want to say it's Johnny O'Brien. Might be wrong. But yeah, I remember him, and they're good. Now, that said, they are kind of a rival of a team that I like. So I'm going to say I'd be that I'd usually root against Bradley. All right, BYU. Got to be BYU, right? Yeah. Cougars, Provo. They had Mark Pope recently. I can't remember who they hired after that. But BYU's always been a pretty good program. They had Jimmer Fredette, who was fun to watch. I liked watching Jimmer. I rooted for him when they had Jimmer. So I'll have him in the more likely to root for. The way they play was fun. I know it's not like a great style of play for like teammates and stuff, but they kind of all knew their roles. I feel like there was an older team too that I know for BYU, but I cannot remember why. If there was like a specific player, so might come to me. But yeah, so BYU, gut feel usually. Well, the logo's brown, and it is brown. Brown is in Providence. It is an Ivy League school. Brown they're the Bears. They're very generic. I forget about them all the time, that they even exist as a school, and I would probably say I'd be indifferent, but would like less. Like I'm compared to some other Ivy League schools, they're not somebody I would know, but I don't really or root for, but I don't really know them that well. All right, the Bryant Bulldogs. Smithfield, Rhode Island. I did not know they were in Rhode Island. I thought they were in New York. But they're in the American East. And the Bulldogs, generic. Logo's not all that bad, but I probably wouldn't root for Bryant either. All right. Bucknell. Bucknell's in Pennsylvania. What town? It is in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. They are the Bison. Bucknell has had some good teams. They've had some players. I believe at least one I can remember going to the NBA, but I can't remember who it specifically was. But it was a few years ago. White guy. Might think of it. But yeah, he was like a good, just like small power forward-ish kind of guy. But I like Bucknell. I'd root for them in the tournament. I don't know if it's the name, the logo, colors. But Bucknell's a school that I've rooted for before. Buffalo, the Bulls, not the Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Bulls. The Buffalo Bulls, they've had some historically pretty decent teams, and they whatever that tournament is now where the alumni come back and play in the summer, they're usually a good team. So they've had some talent, or they're good at like having a system and coming back and playing in it. So they've had some skill. I think this is where Nate Oates was before Alabama, so they had a lot of success then. I don't know if they've carried that over. I don't think of Buffalo though, and I don't really root for them if they're there much, but I'd probably root for them more than some others. So I'll say that I'd be more likely than others to root for them. Butler Bulldogs. Butler was famous growing up, so they play at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, one of the oldest, coolest places to play. This is where the movie Hoosiers, the finals was shot. Butler has had some recent success with Gordon Hayward, Sheldon Mack. They had that center, was it Andrew Smith maybe, who died not all that long after they went to the Final Four. One game was awesome, right? The Gordon Hayward game with Duke where they lost and he almost hit that half quarter was really cool. And then the other one where they lost to like UConn was the most brutal game I've ever seen in my life. It was like 10-12 final. But anyway, Butler made it to the finals. I mean, it's kind of crazy Now they haven't been as good for a bit of time, but I would mostly root for Butler. I like them compared to some other Big East teams and things. So and for being from Indiana, I'd like them. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. I don't want to. Okay, plenty of time here. We'll get into the C's. There's a lot of C's. That's why I say it. I can look down and see Creighton all the way down here. So maybe we'll get through the C's and go from there. All right, California Golden Bears, of course, in the Atlantic Coast Conference in freaking Berkeley, California. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Um, I have tried to make the trade proposal that Stanford and Cal should go to the Big 12 now and trade the ACC for Cincinnati and West Virginia. Just makes a lot more sense. But anyway, Cal is they're the Golden Bears. Um, I Jason Kidd is who I remember most growing up around Cal. Um, I didn't really care. I didn't root against them, but I didn't really care. They're again a West Coast team. I didn't get to see them a lot. I don't know much about them since. Like I don't know who the best players they've had maybe over the last decade have been. So in a way, I'm almost like indifferent in them. They did beat Louisville in the tournament one year when Louisville was kind of just middling and didn't play well and lost like an 8-9 game or something to Cal. So they were decent for a while. Um, and I wouldn't necessarily root against them. I'm kind of indifferent about Cal, honestly. So I know for some of these, I said like their teams I don't know. Well, I know Cal. I'm just kind of like I don't really care how they do. Okay, some of these are going to be tricky. I think this is Cal Baptist in Riverside, California. So California Baptist Lancers. A bit of a generic logo. I don't get to see it all. Lancers is kind of a decent name. Cal Baptist is a little corny. I'll just throw them in the indifferent, but would root for. I tend to like the colors, those types of colors on jerseys and things. So the Lancers is creative enough. Where I will keep it up there. They're in the WAC, um, Western Athletic Conference. Okay, this has to be UC Davis. I think so. UC Davis, yeah, is not up here. Let me go down my list because I bet they're in the U's. Um, yeah, okay, because I didn't know they are the Aggies. They're in the Big West in Davis, California, which I don't really know where Davis is. I don't really root. I try to think of that conference tournament is on. Who do I root for? I don't really root for UC Davis, so I'm going to have them down in the with like less. And then this is UC Irvine, the Anteaters. So the Anteaters are one that I root for because I like the Anteater nickname. And then we have UCLA. I've never heard of this team. No. Okay, so UCLA is California, Los Angeles. Big Ten now. Again, how dumb. So UCLA is obviously known for their history. They had all the wins with John Wooden. Uh, I only get the stories relayed to me about UCLA growing up. Uh, Much disliked because they were so dominant and always got like the best players. So you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had Bill Walton. There were a slew of others that I just don't remember their names. There were more guards and things like that. But the important part was like Denny Crum was an assistant there. He kind of came to Louisville, which is where I live. So that's important. But UCLA, I didn't really hate. Like I didn't grow up hating them. And then they had some teams and players, and I don't know if it's because they're jersey colors. I don't know if it's that they kind of seem cool. I don't know if it's because their cheerleaders are hot. I don't know what it is, but I kind of always liked UCLA a little bit. They made it to the Final Four a couple times. I know Kevin Love was there. Russell Westbrook was there. I'm missing some key players I know on those teams, but yeah, for some reason I kind of root for UCLA. I don't know why, but yeah, they're there. All right. Cal Poly. So I think I got to scroll back up. These Cal ones are all over the place. Uh, is it Cal Poly? Yeah, Big West. San Luis Obispo, California. The Mustangs. Wouldn't know that from the logo. Uh, don't know much about Cal Poly. I know they exist. It's just kind of a funny name that's always existed, but I don't like their logo. It's just kind of generic. I wouldn't root for them in the Big West compared to some of the others. So we'll keep there. Uh, Back down the list, I think UC Riverside is the R. So in Riverside as well. We had a Riverside earlier. They're in the Big West. They're the Highlanders. So cool name. But I don't really root for them. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they had like one season where they had a team I didn't like or something. While I was watching their conference tournament. But yeah, Riverside, I just didn't really root for. Uh, this is UC San Diego. This is not. So I got to make sure I get these right. I'm assuming there's a San Diego down below because I think UC San Diego are the Tritons. And then there's a San Diego that is, and I can't remember their nickname right now, but it's a different one. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on theirs, but so if it is the Tritons, the Toreros, then I like the Tritons. So I'm going to put them up there. And if I find the other one is the flip flop, I'll let you know. All right, UC Santa Barbara. This is a team where I got to have some spillover not happening from a different sport, baseball. I think they smoked Louisville in baseball one year, or Louisville choked or something, and I just remember UC Santa Barbara for that reason. But they do actually have a cool logo and name, Gauchos in Santa Barbara, and I actually do like them. I will root for them in different category. And then, okay, so back up because I don't know if this is Bakersfield. I would assume it's Bakersfield. Let's see, the Roadrunners. Yeah, looks like a Roadrunner, so I'm going to assume yes. So then the Big West, all these teams are in the Big West, all rivals. I don't root for the Roadrunners as much as some of the others. Don't know what it is. Don't know if Bakersfield just doesn't sound right in my head or whatever. Or it's just that I have like a 50-50 of rooting for some Cal teams and not others. Because the next one, the Cal State Fullerton Titans, I do like. And so I will put them in different, but would like more. All those teams I never remember anything about. One of them will make the tournament every year. The rest won't. It's a one bid league. For the most part, I like those programs, and I like, West Coast basketball being something. So it's not just all concentrated in like the three places that actually still care about college basketball. It's like Kansas, Indiana, Kentucky-ish, and then North Carolina. If there's other places, you let me know. But for the most part, it seems like those are the places that at least care about a regular season, and then maybe the rest watch the tournament. So, all right. I think we're through. Oh, no, I stand corrected. Northridge, the Matadors. I like the Matadors because I like their logo. I always like the Matador. It's usually just the ones I've seen. It's just the Matador without the name even being there, which is kind of cool. So I'll have them there. All right, that gets us out of the California schools, at least until we get to the ones not named Cal something. Campbell. You would think it's the Camels. It's not. It's the Fighting Camels. They're mean, and they are in, what is this? Bowie's Creek, North Carolina. I've never heard of that. Campbell Fighting Camels. I don't really care for it. Their camel logo is much better than I recall, but I just don't. I never liked Campbell. I don't know if it's their uniforms. I've seen them play. They're in the Colonial Athletic Conference, and I just never rooted for Campbell. So keep them down there. Canisius. Canisius is in New York, I think. Buffalo. So the Golden Griffins. Cool name, Griffin. You go for something that's like, dragon and just mythical creature stuff. I always give credit for that. So Canisius is in my indifferent, but would like more than some. I'll see that, what is it, the MAC, the MAAC, and I can't remember what it fully stands for, the Metro American Athletic Conference or something like that. They sometimes have some fun teams. Canisius, Siena, Albany, those tournaments can be fun. So Canisius is a team that I have seen a little bit. Central Arkansas, the Bears. Central Arkansas has a cool logo. I like the purple. It's a purple bear. Different. If it was like a brown bear and a brown logo and brown colors, I probably wouldn't root for them, but I do like that they did something a little different there. Central Arkansas, I think it's Scottie Pippen from college. Before my time a little bit, like when he was in college, but that's the name that comes to mind when I think of Central Arkansas. Central Connecticut State, Blue Devils, Northeastern Conference. They're in New Britain, Connecticut, which I would assume is in the middle of Connecticut. So definitely indifferent. Not a huge fan of Connecticut. I'd have them in the like class. Central Michigan and no, never mind. Central, what is this? Central Florida. So they moved Central Florida up, UCF. So Central Florida had that Taco Fall not long ago where they played Duke pretty well. He was the 7'6" center. UCF, I like them for the most part. Trying to think if there was teams or things that I don't really like about them. They had a guy who actually transferred to Louisville from last year. He was kind of fun to watch. He was fun to watch. No, he was in South Florida, not Central Florida. Excuse me. But Central Florida, the Knights. I'm a little indifferent on them for sure. I did like that Taco Fall team, so I'd say I could root for them. Probably not my favorite, but they're okay. Now they're in the Big 12 now, so they're more of a big conference school. I don't know how they're really faring. They're probably just getting rolled a little bit in that league for a while. So we'll just have to get better. Okay, now we get to Central Michigan, and Central Michigan's the Chippewas. Chris Kaman play there, I think, from a long time ago. So 7-footer, played for like the Clippers for a while. Feel like they were good then. Don't know that they've had anybody else since. I liked that team. I don't know that I root for them now, though. I don't really like their logo. Again, there's other teams that I probably prefer to root for in the MAC. Oh, that's the MAC as well. So I'm gonna have Central Michigan there. All right, Charleston. So the Cougars, believe they used to go by College of Charleston. College of Charleston has a bit of a history. I remember them growing up having a good team. And I cannot remember who the best player was on that team, but I do remember College of Charleston having at least one good tournament where, for them, that's probably winning one game maybe. We're playing somebody hard. But Charleston was good, and then Louisville's coach just came from there, Pat Kelsey. They just got Chris Mack. I haven't paid attention to how they're really doing this year. But Charleston's a team that I'd probably root for, indifferent, but I'd root for a little bit. All right, Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is also in Charleston, South Carolina. I don't know if they play each other in two different conferences. So Charleston's in the Colonial Athletic, and Charleston Southern's in the Big South. They're the Buccaneers. Not a huge fan. I mean, you can be a Buck, but I don't really like their colors and their logo. It's okay. They probably won't be too far down in this one, but I don't know that I'd root for them over some other teams. Charlotte 49ers. Now the Charlotte 49ers, there's a little bit more history there. So they played back in the Metro Athletic Conference. I want to say Conference USA as well, but I could be wrong about that. Man, they had one guy who didn't miss a shot for 4 years. I do not remember his name, and I've got to look him up if he doesn't pop into my head. But dang, that dude was a killer. And he also, I remember I was watching a game with some friends where they played Indiana. and he hit a last second shot to beat them. That was just a crazy good shot. That dude was awesome, and I'm sure I hated him at the time. Um, I don't think Charlotte's been relevant for a long time. They had what was it, Lutz? Bobby Lutz was their coach. He was a good coach. They were a good team for a good amount of years, and I'll say I appreciate them now. Like I probably don't pay attention to them, but I'd root for them. Like if they had a good season and came back out. Um, but yeah, that one dude, it feels like it starts with a P, but I could be totally thinking of somebody else. All right, Chattanooga, the Mocs. Always a good name, Chattanooga. Chattanooga's been pretty good. I think I remember them being in the tournament. They're in the SoCon, Southern Conference, and they are uh, a pretty feisty team. I think they've played some bigger schools pretty well recently as well, and I like them. I think they're a scrappy team. I'm going to have them up there. Chattanooga's kind of fun to go visit. So um, McKenzie Arena where they play, I'm sure is a rocking place. Chicago State, the Cougars. Chicago State feels like they suck all the time. I think they just hopefully changed conferences because they're in the Northeastern Conference. They used to be in like the West Coast Conference, which made no sense. But they were probably like independent and had to go somewhere. Anyway, Chicago State's not a school I really root for, so I'm gonna put them in the indifferent with like less. All right, now we get into some tough ones. There's going to be a lot of tough ones. There's just a lot of teams. Cincinnati Bearcats, rivals of Louisville, and Louisville, spoiler alert, I root for. Um, but I always had a special spot for Cincinnati for some reason. It's like a love hate relationship. They're an awesome rival to have. I wish Louisville played them now. They don't. They had Bob Huggins, who you loved to dislike, but I loved him. I still did until he was at West Virginia and all that. They had some players you really hated to play against. They were just like growing up the meanest team you would play. They had Kenyon Martin, who I would say if somebody asked me what was the most consequential injury in college basketball history in terms of like affecting the final of a season, I would say Kenyon Martin. He like got some injury uh, sometime in his like senior year, junior year, whatever, and they were awesome. They were like so hard to play, and he got hurt, and they knocked him down like to a 2 seed, and then they couldn't go very far. But they had some really good players, um, and yeah, they had Eric Hicks for a while, Jason Maxiel. Like you go watch those games live, which I did, and sat not far from him. You're like, I'd die. I mean, you'd put me in the paint, just go ahead and knock me out because there's no way you're going to survive in there. So I always appreciated that about them. Like, and yeah, they're a rival. I don't really. They had Mick Cronin for a while, and they just haven't played Louisville in a long time. And I don't really hate them. I kind of root for them to do well. They're in the Big 12. There's a lot of Big 12 teams I don't really like, so I kind of want them to do better. Yeah, probably shouldn't, but for some reason I want them to be competitive and good. Clemson. Clemson is in the ACC. They're the Tigers. Very generic name, very uh, mediocre basketball for many, many, many years. Brad Brownell, I believe, still their coach. I don't really honestly hate Clemson in basketball. I don't know that I root for them. It's kind of more like I'm indifferent about them a little bit, but because they're rivals, I'd say I'm more likely to root against. That said, sometimes too, there's this thing in basketball, at least for me, where you get to the tournament, you almost root for your rival, like you root for your conference to do well because they like get trashed all year. Good example. Remember, like last year, everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, the ACC is terrible," and they get like 4 teams in the tournament, and the SEC is awesome, and it gets like 50 teams in, and then by the time like the Elite Eight gets there, there's like 2 or 3 ACC teams and like one SEC team. So it's like, yeah, you stop overinflating a conference just because they keep beating up on each other and they beat all these teams early in the year when everybody's just getting their footing. So anyway, Clemson's like a team I'd root for probably in the tournament. So I may end up moving them, if they played somebody like from another conference. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that because I talked myself into it. Whereas a team like Boston College, I don't know. I don't like them that much. But I like Clemson's coach. I like the way they play. They're fine. And again, I am not holding football against them, which would change that quite a bit. Cleveland State, the Vikings. They're the ones that got put on like triple probation for doing something illegal when it was well known other schools were doing stuff illegally and they needed to like lay the hammer down. And so they put it on Cleveland State. I don't know that they ever recovered. I think they finally did. I think there was a year, believe I saw they made the tournament, which was great. So I'll root for them. I feel bad for them. I root for them. I don't know much about them. I feel like Louisville got a decent player from them um, a while back, but I cannot remember if it was Cleveland State um, that they came from. So Trey Lewis, I think, is the player. Okay. Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers, awesome name. Sunbelt. I know Coastal Carolina. I've watched them. I've watched them in the tournament. I'll put them in the more likely to root for category. Uh, I think that's like kind of a fun school. I don't know why they're in Conway, South Carolina. I don't even know where that is. But the Chanticleers, cool name. So I'd pick them out of their conference to say yeah, I'm rooting for them. Colgate Raiders, the Patriot League. You're named after a toothpaste. I don't even know what they're actually named after, but it's in Hamilton, New York. They're the Raiders. Very generic. Don't really care. Would indifferent about them and probably would like less. I think they've made the tournament. And they're actually pretty good sometimes, so it's not like they're bad. But yeah. Colorado Buffaloes. Big 12. We're in the Pac 12. We're in like the Big 12 before that was like the Big 8 or something. The team's been back and forth a million times. But Colorado feels like they've had, I like their jerseys. They're like black and gold. Um, had a pretty good year last year, I think. I want to say that maybe it's the Sweet 16. Uh, I'd probably be more likely to root for them. They've had a couple players that I've enjoyed watching, and I cannot remember who they are, uh, but just that I remember the way the team played and everything was good, so I enjoyed them. And I don't see them a ton. Once again, when they were in like the Pac-12, you don't see them a lot. They're in the Big 12 now. I'm sure I could see them more, but like growing up, I always thought Colorado was all right. Kind of rooted for them. Colorado State, Rams, Mountain West Conference, Fort Collins, Colorado's in Boulder. Colorado State, special place in my heart because I think Louisville beat them in the championship run before. But I kind of like Colorado State. I'd say I like more. I don't really pay attention to them. But the Green, the Rams, they're kind of a team I'd root for over some others. Columbia's in New York. New York. Columbia Lions. Didn't know that. They're in the Ivy. I think their logo looks like crap. I don't think about them, and I'm going to put them down with Colgate. I can't remember if they've made it out of the Ivy League. Ivy League was weird for a while. They didn't have a conference tournament. I do know that, and so I believe they have one now, but I don't think I've seen Columbia come out. Might be mistaken. There's always the hope that I'm going to say something stupid and one random person is actually going to watch this video who like wants to defend that team. Go at it. Go in the comments and tell me why I'm an idiot because that's why you're a fan. Okay, UConn Huskies. UConn's won the last couple titles. They're the little bit of a dynasty. They're falling down a bit this year, so I doubt they'll make a ton of noise other than like a Sweet 16 or something, but we'll see. UConn has had some really good battles in the past with teams I've watched. I've watched them live. Kemba Walker was really fun to watch. He was in that terrible finals, like I mentioned, but he carried a team that was like a 11 seed or something through the tournament. Got to give him credit for that. But they've had some really good teams, like really good teams. Emeka Okafor was really good in college. There was a team that lost to George Mason that I thought was like impossible to beat. But even before that, they had some great players like Richard Hamilton, I think was, I'm trying to think, was Ray Allen there? I think Ray Allen was there. because Allen Iverson was at Georgetown, Kerry Kittles was at Villanova. So yeah, I think that was where Ray Allen was, and then yeah, Richard Hamilton. So a lot of good years, and they've won like some random tournaments. Jim Calhoun was their coach for a long time, but I liked UConn. I kind of always I rooted against them when they were very good, like for upsets. Um, but I'd say like they're on the cusp because there's some teams I really didn't like of theirs, but I do respect the way they played. They always were like a good team, and there's some teams I really don't like that I'd like definitely root for UConn over them. So we'll start there, see where it goes once I have more stuff pop in my head. All right, we're down to Cornell, the Big Red, Ivy League. Cornell also not my favorite. Don't really follow them. They seem to play a better brand of basketball, so I might like move them up in this section. Um, I don't think it's worth me moving them up here because I wouldn't root for them over some other schools. So I'm going to stick Cornell there. They do make the tournament every now and then, and are decently competitive, I think, sometimes. All right, Creighton Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are in Omaha. They're in the Big East. Doug McDermott was a famous Blue Jay. I think they've had some before that as well that aren't ringing a bell, but they McDermott's their coach, his dad. Creighton used to be in the Missouri Valley Conference years ago, so I do remember Creighton growing up. I used to go to Evansville ball games and see Creighton play every now and then, I think. And I always liked the Blue Jays. I liked the color. They were a good, fundamentally sound team. So Creighton's a team I'd usually root for, more so, I think. And some of these, like once I also consider them, I will potentially move some up here. But I'm trying to reserve the tops and bottoms for pretty serious until we shift some down or up. Okay, so that gets us through the C's. Let's see, we're at an hour. I'll go ahead and do the D's, and then we'll start from maybe E the next time. Okay, we have Dartmouth. Dartmouth is in the Ivy League. I know they are in New Hampshire. Let's see, Hanover. They're the Big Green, great movie from the 90s. Not great, but good to watch about soccer. Dartmouth is a team that I probably wouldn't care too much to root for out of the Ivy League. Don't know why. I don't know that they're ever any good. I don't remember them being any good. So yeah, we'll have Dartmouth there. Davidson, good coach for a long time, retired. McCullough, I think. So of Steph Curry fame is Davidson. You can think what you want about Steph Curry today. NBA, some people love him, some people are tired of him, some people hate the way he plays, all this stuff. But the dude was a baller in college. Like, he carried a team in the tournament that was fun to watch. He was fun to watch. He changed the game for sure. And Davidson's a school I'd usually root for. Like, I like the way they played, especially under Bob McCullough. They might have changed how they play now, and I wouldn't know, but I think that's a team I'd more likely root for. The Dayton Flyers, A10. Dayton is a team, they're pretty hard-nosed. They often have good alumni teams as well. Hard-nosed players, play good defense, fun to watch, fly up and down the floor the times that I've watched them. Dayton's a team I'd usually root for out of the Ohio teams. I don't know that I've seen them live. I want to say I've seen them once many years ago, but I like the way they play, and that kind of stuck with me. All right, Delaware. Fighting Blue Hens. Of the Delaware teams, this is the Delaware team that I would root for. Indifferent. I don't know much about Delaware. Haven't been to the state. Don't know much about the state. Don't know why it's just not part of Maryland. Sorry. It's actually, I think, the first state. Was it the first state? So I'm sure there's something special about it. All right. Delaware Hornets. This is the state Hornets, right? Yeah, Delaware State Hornets, MEAC, Dover, Newark is the other Fighting Blue Hens of Delaware. So these are the Hornets. I like their logo. Give them a chance. Cool colors, cool logo. So, all right. DePaul? Blue Demons, I would assume so. So, okay, yeah, DePaul is, they are historically not very good for quite a while now. They're in the Big East, they're in Chicago. DePaul had, I think, some pretty good years a long time ago, maybe in the 80s. And I do know them from around that time. And I knew the school growing up for some reason, but they have been like really bad for quite a bit of time. And they're not a team I'd really care about or root for, but I'd probably root against DePaul. I don't know what it is. I just never liked them that much. All right, Detroit, the Titans. This is Detroit Mercy, I think. Detroit. It just says Detroit. Maybe they just go by Detroit now, but it's Detroit Mercy is who I remember the Titans from. Joke that was intended. So they had, I think, was that Mike Davis that was coaching there, and then his son like almost broke the record, but played like a million more games or something. So I'm glad he didn't. But yeah, Detroit Titans are a team I don't care about, but I wouldn't really root for them. Not a big fan of like Detroit teams. All right, the Drake Bulldogs. Drake Bulldogs are the MVC. They're kind of the cream of the crop usually in the MVC lately. Des Moines, Iowa. Drake is usually pretty decent, like even in the tournament, I think, where they can win a game or two. But they are a rival kind of school as well, like Bradley. I don't like them as less than Bradley, so I'd have them up here in the more likely to root against. The Drexel Dragons, Philly. They're not considered in part of that Big Five or whatever Philly has. It's like St. Joe's and Yale and who else? I don't even remember. It's like Temple, Villanova, Penn. No, yeah, Penn, not Yale. Penn, St. Joe's, Villanova, Temple, and maybe it is Drexel. I don't know. But there's like a fifth team, I think. And so, anyway, Drexel is kind of the little brother, I think, of Philly, but they have a really cool logo. And I remember they came in and beat Louisville one year when Louisville wasn't very good. And I think we got one of our good players that we didn't get to play in the tournament, Damian Lee from Drexel. But I like them more. I don't know much about them otherwise, but I'd root for Drexel, the Dragons. All right. Duke, the Duke Blue Devils. Okay. Duke's a tricky one because it's very polarizing for people. Duke had Mike Krzyzewski forever. That was since I was growing up. My history with Duke is I don't remember them when they played like Louisville in the finals or anything. I was too young. I mean, if I did, it was like just scattered memories of it. My first real experience was when Kentucky played them in the Elite Eight that year. It is the first time I heard my mom say the F word. Was when, and maybe the only time, is when Christian Laettner hit the turnaround shot that is very famous for defeating Kentucky. There's an insistence that he should have been kicked out of the game because he stepped on Timberlake's leg or chest coming down the floor. So yeah, that was that. And then Duke, continued to be the annoying team for a long time because you had Cherokee Parks, you had Grant Hill, you had Bobby Hurley, on and then you get to the new school. You had the J.J. Reddicks, the Grayson Allens, Kyrie Irvings, Zion, when they switched and went to the whole one and done program that Kentucky had adopted. Jahlil Okafor, a lot of good teams here and there. Sometimes they'd choke a little early, and other times they'd win it all. So just all over the place. But I don't like Duke. I am not a Duke fan. I appreciate that Duke exists. I like rooting against them, but that's a team I usually root against. Jay Williams, Chris Duhon, there's so many years I could go through of players I wasn't a fan of, and I don't know. They have Cooper Flag now, which I haven't even really watched, but Yeah, trying to think of like a redeeming. Shane Battier used to not okay. I'm moving Duke down to favorites to root against because I can't think of a good of a team or a player that I really like from them. Yep. All right. Dukes and Durham, North Carolina, ACC. There is a chance my niece goes to basketball or to school there, so I might have to change my tune, but that's okay. All right, Duquesne, the Dukes. Dumb logo to me. They're in Pittsburgh, the A10. I don't really care. I don't know much about them, but they're in my don't really like. So, um, all right. I'll go. Okay, I'm gonna finish up the E's as well. Sorry, it was a false alarm on the D's because I'm gonna get. It's only a few more, and I'll get to some better conversation to finish this one, and then go forward with the G's after that. Okay, East Carolina, the Pirates are in the AAC, American Athletic. They're in Greenville, North Carolina. They are a purple, cool pirate-looking logo. Know them more for football. Basketball, I don't think's historically been good, but I'm indifferent about them. But I kind of like their program. I never didn't like East Carolina. They're just kind of out there. Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois is the Panthers. They're in Charleston, Illinois. They're in the OVC, the Ohio Valley. Very generic team. I don't think anything of them, and I would probably not root for them. They just are a kind of generic looking logo. And somebody, the Panthers it looks like a panther, but it's blue. Okay. Maybe a purple panther would have been better. I don't know. All right, Eastern Kentucky, the Colonels. They are in Kentucky, so they hold a little bit of a special spot. They are in Richmond, Kentucky, just south of Lexington, where University of Kentucky is. I try to root for local teams. I'll have them in the team I'd root for to do well, like in the tournament. All right, Eastern Michigan, very generic logo. The Eagles do something more with it. I don't know why. It's just an E. I will put them in the indifferent category as well. They are, let's see, Eastern Michigan is in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Pardon the pronunciation. They're in the MAC, and they're not one of my favorite MAC teams. They're just, I forget they even exist most of the time. All right. And then we have Eastern Washington. So this is in Cheney, Washington. They are the Eagles, Big Sky. I don't think anything of them. They are a team I don't necessarily care about or care for. I don't know that I'd root for a Washington team. So I will have them up there. All right. Then we have a couple teams here. I'm trying to see who this is because I don't know on the list. I may have to come back to that one because it's not like next on the list. And figure out what that logo is. No, not ringing a bell. Maybe it is. I'll look it up. It might be East Texas A&M. Might be, but I'm not sure. Okay, so Elon. Elon is not Elon Musk or named after him. It is the Colonial Athletic. They are in Phoenix. No, they are the Phoenix, excuse me. They're in Elon, North Carolina. Phoenix is a pretty cool name, rising from the ashes, so I'll give them a little credit for that. That's in North Carolina. I don't hate some North Carolina schools, so I'll have Elon. Pretty cool looking up there in the indifferent would like more. Okay, now we get to the University of Evansville. UE holds a special place. I'm wearing a Purple Aces shirt right now because I grew up around Evansville, not too far from it. My brother went to school there. Evansville today kind of sucks. Their program has been not doing anything. They're in the Missouri Valley. They're in Evansville, Indiana, but they have a pretty good bit of history. So they were Division II champions a few times in their way back, and then they promoted up to D1, and they were decent in the Missouri Valley Conference. They made the tournament a couple of years at least. Jim Cruz was their coach, who was a disciple of Bob Knight. They were well known for having sleeves on their jerseys. which I still think was pretty cool. Like those jerseys, in my opinion, they should have never got rid of. I get young kids would be like, that's stupid, but no, it looked cool. But I used to go to Evansville basketball camp during the summer every few years, or every year pretty well, with one of my friends. And um, they taught me how to shoot, and I'm a pretty decent shooter. They were very like specific in how they teach you how to shoot and like what to focus on. You watch like a lot of, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but like Pete Maravich videos and stuff. But their team reflected that. When you watch them back in the early 90s or so, uh, they essentially had four, if not five guys who could shoot the ball. They had one really great player who was kind of the first team that I remember, which his name was Parrish K-Spear. Parrish K-Spear should have been, in my opinion, a pro, but he just, I think, had personal issues and stuff that got in the way of it. But that dude was like dominant. They had Reed Jackson, Andy Elkins, some other players that Scott Scheffler, I think, that just could shoot the lights out. Like take basketball today and put it back in that time. It was so different than anything else you've really seen. And they would just like really give some good teams hard times because they just could shoot the ball. A little bit later, they had they had Brent Kell, who I remember being like, felt like he shot 95% from three. He was just a specialist, but that's what he did. Stand in the corner, he would hit it every time. And then they had Marcus Wilson, who was a really good player. I think they made the tournament with him, lost to like Florida State. But anyway, UE was a fun place to watch a game. They had Roberts Stadium packed. The shame of it all now, that's like a city where you can see they built an arena downtown. They lost a lot of fan support. They probably don't have many fans come to games anymore. And it's just kind of sad that a program that used to have a lot of fans and a lot of excitement and stuff can't rekindle that. And I was honestly a little afraid of that with Louisville because they've been down so long. Like you feel it within a community that it's like it sucks. And as much as I may hate some teams, I don't really ever want them to be so bad that there's nothing to even care about. Like that's when basketball really gets to its worst. And that's kind of where I think some of it is right now. It's like you're just not good enough to really, hate anybody or care about anybody. They're all so even. It's like, what are we doing? You can't build dynasties and stuff as much as you used to be able to by recruiting and having a good program. So anyway, UE is one of my favorites to root for. Terrible. They don't win anymore, but I would certainly root for them if they made the tournament. It'd be awesome. So we will cut this portion off. I will look up this E and make sure I'm getting it right. And then we will go into the F's and four. There's not many F's, it doesn't look like. So hopefully we'll be able to get through about another, 50 or so the next one. We'll see. All right, we'll stop there and start the next time.